Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa ashabihi, wa man sarra sabilihi ila yawmiddin amma ba'd. So today, inshallah ta'ala, we'll continue with the book Al-Mulaqis Al-Fiqhi by Shaykh Salih Al-Fawzan, hafidullah. And today, inshallah ta'ala, we'll be discussing concerning from where we have left off regarding the bab fi salat al-a'dhar. So we'll be discussing concerning of those group of people regarding their salat, that they have a legitimate, a valid excuse in the Sharia that their salat can be done different from what would be expected normally. So we'll discuss concerning what is mentioned here regarding this particular case, and then we'll take it from there. Bidnillah, tabaraka ta'ala.
Bismillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Chapter 25, the prayer of those having legal excuses. Qala ma'allif hafidhahullah. Those with legal excuses are the sick, the traveller, and those who fear they cannot establish prayer as completely as those without excuses. The lawgiver has enlightened the hardship for the excused Muslim and ordered them to perform prayer as much as they can. This ruling shows the ease and relief intended for Muslims in the Sharia, Islamic law, as it always eliminates hardships. Allah says, English rendering being, He has chosen you and has not placed upon you in the religion any difficulty. Al-Quran, Surah Al-Hajj 78. Allah exalted be He also mentions, English rendering being, Allah intends for you ease and does not intend for you hardship. Surah Al-Baqarah 185. In addition, Allah exalted be He says, Allah does not charge a soul except with that within its capacity. Further, He says, English rendering being, so fear Allah as you are able. Surah Al-Taghabun, verse 16. Moreover, the Prophet ﷺ said, if I order you to do something, then do of it as much as you can. This is to be added to many other legal texts that indicate the favor of Allah upon His servants and how He granted them ease in whatever He has ordered for them. Now,
yes, so the author rahimahullah really discussing concerning this particular bab, and also something mentioned in the books of the ulama of fiqh regarding we have cases where people who may have a legitimate reason where they are unable to carry out an act as normally be done. So the Shaykh Hafidullah, he mentioned regarding of cases that people are under, that will fall under this group of people. So he mentioned regarding fi as-salat al-a'dhar, the salat of those people of al-a'dhar. And the ulama mentioned concerning, as for those people al-a'dhar, meaning concerning rafa al-lawm, that these people that they are not to be chastised or to be condemned for what they're doing because they have a legitimate reason from the Sharia regarding an excuse to do things in a particular way. So also, as he mentioned, of those that regarding the Sharia of Islam, as he mentioned that the Sharia of Islam is not there to make things difficult and overburdening upon people, but in case that situation and circumstance might change, and the Sharia also have taken this into consideration and give these allowances. So you find concern with the Sharia of Islam, it have rules and regulations and certain qawahid that relates, principles that relate concerning people who may have mashaqqa, in case of mashaqqa regarding concerning and concern. So that's of the things that are taken into consideration in Sharia. So they mentioned, so you have different principle that applies regarding those situations. Of those principles mentioned concerning that raf al-araj is to remove any form of difficulties. Also of those principles concerning al-mashaqqa, yajlib al-taysir, that when you have difficulties, then it brings about taysir and other principles that are there. So these are the things that the Shaykh Hafidullah have mentioned, and also some adillah to prove that the Islam is not there to make things overly burdensome and difficult, but rather at times things are there's a leeway for those who have a legitimate reason. And he mentioned a hadith, إِذَا أَمَرْتُكُمْ بِأَمْرٍ, then he mentioned if I command you regarding something, and that hadith in the Bukhari and Muslim. That hadith in the Bukhari and Muslim. Aywa.
Qala ma'allif hafizahullah. As mentioned, this is to be added to many other legal texts that indicate the favor of Allah upon His servant and how He granted them ease in whatever He ordained for them. Among these things made easy for the Muslims is the prayer of the person with excuses of sickness, travel, or fear. The first, the prayer now.
So the Shaykh so mentioned regarding concerning Islam that I've given certain type of ease in certain situation, and sometimes those situation may vary. So in case concerning, it sometimes may apply to the person regarding Salah. So there's certain ease regarding matters of Salat. Also in certain cases of concern, a person about udhr, regarding suffer when the person is traveling. Also regarding things might change, regarding concerning cases of khawf. So the Shaykh here mentioned concerning cases concerning marid, the person who's ill, as those more common that may occur. Also that he will mention also another case concerning the person who's a raqib, the person who is, they said a raqib, who's traveling on a mount. Also he'll discuss concerning al-musafir, the person who is a traveler, and what applies to him regarding the ease that is giving to him. And also he will discuss concerning the case concerning Salatul Khawf. So these are certain cases concerning Al-Adhar, but they mention that it applies to Salat. It applies also regards, also in the area concerning As-Siyam, the rules of Siyam also. This is also taken into consideration regarding certain difficulty that certain group of people may face because of their illness and the likes. So these are the rules of Islam that are considered. These are those things that are considered. And in regarding Salat, we'll be discussing concerning As-Salat al-Marid.
قال المؤلف حفظه الله. The first, the prayer performed by the sick. Prayer is not to be abandoned under any circumstances. The Muslim person must perform prayer standing if he can, and it is permissible for him to lean on a stick or the like if he needs this, since the related fundamental rule states the means to fulfill an obligation are to be considered obligatory. It is permissible for a Muslim person to sit in prayer if he cannot stand, due to one of the following reasons or the like.
So Shaykh Hafidullah, in discussing concerning matters regarding as-salat, regarding al-marid, as you mentioned as a general principle, inna salat la tutrak abadan, that salat is not to be missed and to be abandoned. So that's concerning that concerning matters regarding, you find concerning that the person, we have two genders, male and female. So female have a legitimate reason, even if they are not ill, to miss salah. So female, because of their makeup regarding concerning their menstrual cycle, that when they have their menstrual cycle, then they are not allowed to pray. So that will occur for them monthly in most cases. So they have a legitimate reason to miss their salat. Then we have a case concerning males. As for male who's considered to be aqil baligh, every male adult, then he has to pray all the time. So long as the person have his aql, is an adult, and he has his aql, he has his intellect, then salat is wajib upon him. So until he loses his intellect, then the salat is not obliged upon him. So it's concerning regarding these matters, regarding salat. So cases where certain people, situation where certain things might change due to certain factors, and these will be explained away.
قال المؤلف حفظه الله. If he cannot stand due to one of the following reasons, he is unable to stand, if it is difficult for him to stand, if he fears to increase his illness or delay his recovery by standing. So, the inability of a Muslim person to stand in the prayer is not a condition of the permissibility to sit in the prayer. However, little difficulty is not a legal excuse to sit in the prayer. Only real difficulty is considered in this respect. Scholars unanimously agree that if a Muslim person is unable to stand in obligatory prayer, it is permissible for him to sit. Moreover, there is no need for him to re-perform his prayer again when he gets well. His reward does not decrease, and the way he sits is according to the way he desires. For the lawgiver does not ordain a specific way of sitting for the person. So in whatever manner he sits, it is permissible. Now,
so the first of those points regarding concerning the salat, regarding the Shaykh he mentioned concerning the فإن لم يستطع المريض القيام في الصلاة بأن أجز عنه, then he mentioned that of those things where the person said to be marid, on the what's mentioned concerning the person ajz, and the person unable to stand, the person also may be so he's unable to pray normally. Also concerning mashaqqa, the person finds it difficult. And also al-khif, the person also, because of situation of fear in standing and pray. So you have certain situation a person may not be able to pray standing, so the person can go to what is given next. So regarding, as the Shaykh mentioned, regarding concern, but also to look concerning Salatul Marid, as to when a person is allowed or considered to be a dabit, kind of somewhat a principle regarding when this person is allowed to pray in these different manners because of illness. So you have a discussion between the ulama regarding that matter. Some of the ulama all concerning that one, that the person regarding we know concerning this is regarding to Salatul Farida. As we know before, we covered before concerning, as for Salatul Nafila, it is not a condition that the person have to pray sitting, but he gets less reward for praying sitting. So the person is not a condition, a person will pray standing if he's doing the nafila salat. But as for the compulsory salat, the person must pray standing, and for him to sit, he must have a reason. So I mentioned regarding the ulama concerns, what is concerning this matter regarding what is this level of mashaqqa, this level of difficulties that will allow the person to have a legitimate reason to pray sitting. So of the ulama mentioned that they deem what is called mashaqqa, these difficulties, that is difficulties, and yushaq alayhi mashaqqatun shadid, that a person is experiencing that a harsh, severe difficulty regarding his salat. When I mentioned that of those things that difficult will be decided based upon tadhab khushu, that a person have lost his khushu. فإن كانت مشقة أقل عن ذلك لم يجز له القعود. If the person concerned, the person who have lost his, they mention khushu. So that's concerned of view of the ulama, that the person, if that mashaqqa, that difficulty with a person is unable to keep his khushu because of the pain that he's facing, then the person have a legitimate reason to sit in his salat. So that's concerning that matter. And of those who can somewhat, they mention that the main thing regarding what will decide as to mashaqqa, it is diyab al-khushu. Well, of those concerning Imam Haramain al-Juwayni, and also we find also that Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah also agree with his view that the deciding factor regarding mashaqqa shadid is a person not able to concentrate and have khushu in his salat. That's come as the view taken by some of the ulama. Another group of the ulama that they all concerned of those things, the person would be considered to have a legitimate reason for this. Is concerned a person, one, ajiz and qiyam, the person who can sit because he's unable to stand. Also, that the person either an yazid bihi al-marad, the person illness, if he was to pray standing, it will increase in his illness. Also, they mention so those are the things concerning, and also an yata'akhkhar al-shafa. Also, the person that it would delay, praying standing would delay is recovery. So these are things they look at regarding how to decide concerning that a person is allowed to sit or not to sit. So it means the person is unable, a person a valid reason. The person also, if he was to pray in that manner, then it can make things more difficult for him, prolong his illness, or make it more severe, or delay his recovery. So these are things that ulama they look at regarding that particular matter as outlined here by the Shaykh. Naam. And they mention concerning al-ijma between the ulama on this topic, as we know concerning of the hujjah in the Islam, in the Sharia, of the what is considered to be of the what is as a proof in Islam. We have Quran, wa Sunnah, al-thabita, and third al-ijma. So Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, the Shaykh he mentioned is an ijma. Qad ajma al-ulama. There's an ijma, a consensus between the ulama, ala anna man ajza an qiyam fil farida sallaha qa'idan. So he mentioned that, and that is the statement of Imam Nawawi rahimahullah. So Imam Nawawi rahimahullah is the one who have mentioned this ijma between the ulama, this consensus between the ulama, that the person who's unable to pray standing, then he goes in a sitting position in the compulsory salat, as we mentioned, in the compulsory salat. Naam.
قال مؤلف حفظه الله, if a Muslim person cannot sit in prayer and it causes him a real difficulty to sit, then it is permissible for him to lie on his side facing the Qibla. It is desirable for him in this case to lie on his right side. If there is no one to help him face the Qibla, then he cannot face the Qibla himself, then it is permissible for him to perform prayer facing whatever direction he can face. If a Muslim person cannot lie on his side in prayer, it is permissible for him to lie on his back, making his legs face the Qibla if possible. If a Muslim person sits in prayer, or if he lies on his side or back and cannot prostrate, then it is sufficient for him to beckon bow and prostration with his head, making his head a bit lower to beckon prostration than in bowing. If a Muslim person sits in prayer and can prostrate, it is obligatory for him to prostrate, and it is not sufficient then to beckon prostration with his head. The proof of the legal permission detailed previously in the hadith related by Al-Bukhari and the compilers of Sunan on the authority of Imran ibn Hussein, may Allah be pleased with him, who narrated, I had hemorrhoids, so I asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam how I could perform prayer. He, the sallallahu alaihi wasallam, replied, perform prayer while standing, and if you cannot, perform it while sitting, and if you cannot do even that, then perform it lying on your side. And Nasa'i added in this narration that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, and if you cannot, perform prayer lying on your back. In addition, Allah says, English rendering being, Allah does not charge a soul except with that within its capacity. Al-Baqarah 286.
Okay.
Naam.
So Shaykh Hafidullah, that you mentioned regarding the case of the person who's married, the person who's ill, regarding the different ways in which the person can pray. So you mentioned, so the ulama have mentioned regarding that, there's like 5 ways that you can break down regarding the salat of the person who's ill. So the first concern that as mentioned that, so different ways that the person may be ill, but is able to stand, qa'im. He's able to stand qa'im, but he mustanad ila shay. But also he needs to, if he's able to stand, but by holding onto something. So in that case, if the person can stand and he's holding like a stick or something to help him to stand, then a person should pray in that manner. So he's still able to stand, but he needs something to rest onto or hold onto, then a person pray in that manner. So that's the first, as the ulama have mentioned. So qa'im wa in kana mustanadan. So if the second regarding that person, the taratib, the different ways. The second way concerning the person unable to stand in any form, then a person go sitting. So qa'idan. So the person sit, whether in a chair or on the ground. But the person sit according to their ability. Then the third method is regarding al-jamb. The person he prays on his side. As the Shaykh mentioned that, the ulama, rahimahullah, based upon that they preferred if the person able can do it on his right side. If not, it is still allowed to pray on his left side. So whether he prays preferable on his right, but if the person was to pray on his left side, it is still considered to be valid. It's still considered to be valid. Then the fourth method is regarding concern is mentioned, mustalqiyan, that a person he prays in a way where he's now lying on his back. So the person will pray on his back. Then I mentioned also a fifth method regarding yusalli biqalb. So the person that he prays also in a fifth method, he prays with his eyes, in the sense of if the person unable to start not his eyes, the person pray with his qalb, which is his heart. So the person will pray with his qalb if he's unable to speak or to any type of movement. So the person in a situation where he's unable to speak, so if he's able to speak, then he speaks. If he's unable to move, so you go to concerning Fatiha, then you speak as to say what is to be said in ruku, then he will say as to say what is to say in sujood. So he'll go about in salat in this manner because he's unable to make any movement. But if the person is unable to make any movement or any form of speech, but he's still somewhat, and he's still conscious, he's like, then that person do it in his heart. He makes his salat in his heart. As we mentioned before, that the salat is still wajib upon a person of sound mind. So that's concerned different ways regarding the salat. Then the Shaykh Hafidullah, he mentioned a dalil regarding how the ulama have come to this conclusion. So he mentioned a hadith, that is the hadith of Imran ibn Hussein anhu. That's akhrajahu al-Bukhari wa al-Sunan. So regarding this hadith, that he mentioned a hadith in the Bukhari, that one of the companions that mentioned that he had an illness, and he put his situation to the Prophet ﷺ regarding as to how to go about and to pray, seeing that he was ill and unable to pray. So the Prophet ﷺ explained to the person, Salli qa'iman, pray standing. فَإِن لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ, if you're unable, then صَلِّ قَائِدًا, if you're unable to pray standing, then pray sitting. Then they mention if you're not able, then pray ala jamb, then you pray on your side. So he gave him the different ways in which the person can pray due to each person's situation and circumstance. Then he mentioned, so that part of the hadith is collected by Bukhari and others. That hadith is collected by Bukhari and Ashabu Sunan. They mentioned different, so they mentioned regarding that, mentioned Zada al-Nasa'i. Zada al-Nasa'i. So Nasa'i rahimullah of Kutubu Sunan, of Ashabu Sunan. So also mentioned that he mentioned فَإِن لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ فَمُسْتَلْقِيًا, that An-Nasai rahimahullah in his addition in this hadith, that at the end it mentions something additional sentence, which is, and if you're unable to do what was mentioned before, previously mentioned, then you're able to lie on your back. So as for this part of the hadith regarding Zada Nasa'i, they said na waqafat, there's something to be mindful of concerning that additional wording that is mentioned, that is mentioned, that it is said by Nasa'i, that you find as al-ulama of hadith, that you find that a discussion regarding this additional statement. So this additional statement regarding concerning of the ulama of hadith have mentioned that this hadith is not mentioned in Nasa'i in his collection, not in the Sugra or Kubra that is in print and have been seen so far. So in whatever prints of Nasa'i, in his Sugra, wal Kubra, al Mujtaba, and al Kubra, this hadith with this additional wording is not mentioned. So concerning that man, even al-Mizzi, also didn't mention of the ulama of old, didn't mention concerning this additional statement. So they mentioned that generally regarding the books or masadir of hadith that have reached us today and that are also in print, that ulama mentioned, this additional statement is not found. But you find that the statement is mentioned in many books of the fuqaha. So you find that Ibn Qudama have mentioned this statement, Ibn Hajar has mentioned his statement, and many others have mentioned this particular additional. When they mention hadith, they will mention with this wording. But as mentioned, it is not per se actually been found or seen in the books that are in print regarding An-Nasa'i. So some ulama all concerned that maybe an error have occurred regarding this particular hadith. And to prove regarding this hadith, as we like a discussion regarding this hadith is mentioned like in the books of the Hanabila. So you find that books of Hanabila, as we discuss concerning the madhab of the Hanabila, and also others of the madha'ib who mention this hadith, but we'll particularly discuss concerning the books of the Hanabila, that one of those books that are written concerning a book that is considered to be of the Kutub Hadith al-Ahkam, Kutub Hadith al-Ahkam, where you find certain books have been collected or written by ulama of hadith that can somewhat give us a collection of hadith that relates to ahkam shar'iyyah, but mainly using hadith as the basis. So of those books is a book written by Masjid ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, who's the grandfather of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, who's also the ulama of the Hanabila. And this book is called Al-Muntaqa fi Ahkam al-Shar'iyyah min Kalam Khayr al-Bariyah alayhi salatu wassalam. So Masjid ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, that this book is kind of somewhat to collect the ahadith al-ahkam that more relates to the madhab of the Hanabila, or the Hanabila use as dalil. So he mentioned regarding the hadith, he mentioned Bab Kitab Salat al-Marid. And according to this print, he mentioned, and Imran ibn Husayn, that hadith we mentioned before of Imran ibn Husayn, they mentioned the hadith, they mentioned Rawahu Jama' illa Muslim, that hadith is narrated by the Jama' except for Imam Muslim. The Muhaqqiq, who's one of the Shaykh from Al-Misr, who is known for his checking of books of hadith and other books, he mentioned that in his footnote he mentioned Akhrajahu Bukhari, Ahmed, Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah. And if you notice, he doesn't mention regarding the hadith of Imran ibn Husayn, he doesn't mention An-Nasa'i. So he mentioned Bukhari, Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, wa Ibn Majah. And also he mentioned Ahmed. But also he didn't mention Muslim, and he didn't mention Nasa'i. So the hadith is not found in, so according to in the author here, he kind of indicates that this hadith is not found in the books of Nasa'i. Even though I mentioned that, they mention Zadam Nasa'i. But that's the asl of the hadith with the hadith of Imran ibn Husayn. Then we find that even to the extent we find some of the ulama of contemporary times of authenticate this act, the wording of Nasa'i. Even though So, and that is based upon what will be mentioned next. Zad Nasa'i. So he mentioned the author here, Zad Nasa'i, and he mentioned, but he didn't make, as I said, takhrij of the statement of Nasa'i. So even if so, the statement with the extra wording is also mentioned by Masjid ibn Taymiyyah, but those who have checked the book were unable to reference this statement back to Nasa'i. Then he mentioned a hadith that comes after, which is a hadith of Ali ibn Abi Talib anhu, that he mentioned, Nabi alayhi salam قال يصلي المريض قائما al-hadith. So I mentioned concerning the hadith mentioned that the person who is ill is to pray قائما فإن لا يستطع إن استطاع. If the person is able, then I mentioned the one who is able to continue concerning. They mentioned the end of the hadith mentioned that meant that they mentioned أن يصلي على جنبه أيمن صلى مستلقيا رجلاه مما يلي القبلة. So that kind of that hadith it mentioned this additional wording of the person praying, as it mentioned mustalqiyan. So that's the hadith of Ali ibn Abi Talib that mentioned about praying on one's back. As for this hadith, it is mentioned rawahu Daraqutni and also Bayhaqi. Rawahu Daraqutni and Bayhaqi. And they mention here concerning that hadith that ankarahu al-Dhahabi fi mizan. So this hadith is somewhat is all to be daif of them concerning al-Dhahabi, ankara the hadith, and more so that shows concern that the hadith is somewhat that mention about praying on the back is actually a hadith which is weak. And the hadith is the hadith of Ali ibn Abi Talib. So that's concerned discussion regarding sometime what is mentioned, as we said, I mentioned, but the general overall principle of what is mentioned is correct. As I mentioned, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. So concerned the general meaning is correct based upon other texts, and that being the ayat in Surah Al-Baqarah regarding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't put a burden more than a person can bear. Aywa.
قال مؤلف حفظه الله. Here we should draw the attention to those Muslims who give up prayer when they are sick or when they have had surgical operations, claiming that they cannot perform the acts of prayer properly, or they cannot perform ablution, or their clothes are impure, or any other excuses. They commit a big mistake, since a Muslim is not permitted to give up prayer when he cannot perform some of its conditions, integral parts, or obligations, but must perform prayer as much as he can, as Allah says, "Fear Allah as much as you are able." Surah At-Taghabun, verse 16. Naam.
So after this point, Shaykh Hafidullah, you mentioned regarding huna yajib at-tanbih, of those things that to be mindful of regarding the Muslim, that he mentioned regarding that you might find that some of the people amongst the Muslim, that because of the situation they may be in, that they may not find that they're able to pray the salat in the normal, complete fashion that they would like. So maybe their clothing is not as tidy, as clean as it should be, something of filth maybe on their clothing, so the person has somewhat, they are left salat completely and miss that salat. So if a case concerns a person unable to change their clothing, they have enough time, the person have some type of filth on their clothing, and the person has enough time that they're able to change that clothing, then a person, and they will still have time to pray, then a person must do so. And delay the salat until they're able to change and pray the salat normally. But if the person find that the time is running out and they are unable to change their clothing or to put that thing in place, then the person pray according to their ability, according to the situation they're in, and not leave the salat. So the timing is vital. So the timings of the more important of the matters regarding the arkan of salat, where the person, if he's going to miss the timing, then he prays in the way which is naqis, which is a bit deficient, rather than miss that time. So that's concerning that matter to be mindful of. Also, you find situation regarding that people sometimes may delay salat and not pray the salat in his right timing and his right way, because of sometimes they find that in today's time that you find that with females and men of the makeup, that they would because they don't want to wash the makeup, they can't make wudu, so they would delay their salat until later on when the time have gone, and many times and maybe other salat have passed before they're able to pray, because they don't want to undo their makeup, and that's also incorrect. So those are things to be mindful of regarding those matters. Aywa.
قال مؤلف حفظه الله, a Muslim person may say, when I get well, I'll make up for the prayers I missed during the days of my illness. This is legally considered either ignorance or negligence in religion, for the prayer is to be performed at its due time as much as one can, and it is not permitted to be delayed until one misses its due time. Hence, there should be much attention paid to such a matter, and besides, there should be religious awareness in hospitals. Moreover, hospitals should recognize the person's condition concerning performing prayer and other legal obligations that they are in need to know. And the aforementioned legal rulings concerning whoever has a legal excuse from the beginning of prayer until it ends. However, there are some cases in which a Muslim may have a legal excuse for only a part of his prayer, such as one may start prayer when one is standing and then feels that he cannot stand anymore while performing it. 2, one may start prayer when one is not able to stand and then feels that one can stand while performing it. 3, one may start prayer when one is sitting and then feels that he cannot sit anymore while performing it. And 4, one may start prayer when one is lying on one side and then one feels that one can sit. In such cases, one must shift to the position that legally suits one's ability, and it is obligatory then to complete one's prayer in this state. This is because Allah, exalted be He, says, English rendering being, and fear Allah as much as you are able, as we mentioned, Surah At-Taghabun, verse 16. Thus, one is to shift to the standing posture when one is able, and one is to shift to the sitting posture when one is unable to stand, and so on. If one is able to stand and sit but cannot bow or prostrate, one is to beckon bow with one's head while standing, and beckon prostration with one's head while sitting, to make a difference between the bowing and the prostration as much as one can. Now,
yes, so I was mentioning concerning that of those matters regarding concerning that the Muslim one regarding that being negligent and also ignorant regarding certain matters of salat, that a person because of illness believe that they have an open-ended reason to miss the salat, and that's not the case. So while the person is even ill, while during illness, the person is still obliged and expected to make his salat according to how he's able, and not to leave the salat off. And also we find that in today's time, that also Shaykh mentioned that also of those practices that you find in some of the Muslim countries, and also you find now being adopted in some of the non-Muslim countries, that regarding concerning places, concerning al-mustashfayat, regarding concerning hospitals, that they kind of somewhat now provide a place where people can pray. So you find that in this country, in England and in London in particular, and also that you'll find that in our local airports, major ones, that we'll find that a place that is called a faith area where a person can go and pray. And also in the hospitals, also they provide a faith area where people also can pray. So the person make use of those things if they are inside the hospital, and also if the person is unable, then they pray according to their ability. Then also, even inside the malls that we have today, the more renowned of the malls, that also have a place designated for salat. That's in London and in most places that we find now. Then also you find that he mentioned that the person regarding salat, that the person might find himself in a different situation and circumstance, where the person at times may start initially salat in a standing position, but due to illness unable to carry on this, but a person start in that manner and continue in the way that is suitable to him. And sometimes a person in salat may have to change his position based upon the severity of his illness and the extent of his illness. So those are things that is the person being aware of regarding if he's able to stand, and for when he's be able to stand, and if he's unable, then he goes to the sitting position or whatever is suitable to his illness. So the person knowing that everything is not fixed in one particular way, but knowing what position is most suited for their illness, and use that which is the best one that is allowed in the Sharia. So that's concerning those matters.
قال مؤلف حفظه الله, a Muslim person is permitted to perform prayer lying on his back, though he is able to stand, if a trustworthy Muslim doctor tells him that he cannot recover except when he performs prayer while lying on his back. This is because the Prophet ﷺ performed prayer while sitting when the right side of his body was injured. Also, Salama, may Allah be pleased with her, did not prostrate in her prayer when she suffered from ophthalmia. Now,
After the Shaykh mentioned regarding concern a person that one is allowed to pray on their back because of their illness, then he mentioned concern to know that and if he's told so by he mentioned Tabib Muslim Thiqah. So the person is advised by a doctor that they should pray in this manner, then the person should take the advice of the doctor. So of the thing that to be mindful of, Allah the Quran concerned Tabib Muslim Thiqah. So we said put as a condition, is it a conditional that the Tabib, the doctor, must be Muslim? So if, for example, find a non-Muslim doctor was to advise the patient who's a Muslim that based upon his illness that he advised him or that patient that one should pray in a certain position, should we take that advice from a doctor or not? Then we said to know that is it conditional a doctor must be a Muslim? That's a matter to be discussed by the ulama. Some of the ulama hold that it's advisable and better to have a Muslim doctor, but if one cannot find a Muslim doctor, then one take the advice of even a non-Muslim doctor, as the person is a specialist in that field. So one can take the advice of that non-Muslim doctor based upon that doctor is a specialist in that field. Now, so that's concerned the matter. So it's not a requirement. The person must seek the advice of a Muslim doctor, but if that is present and there, then that's better. But if not, a non-Muslim doctor advice can be taken. Wallahu alam.
قال المؤلف حفظه الله, prayer enjoys a great importance in Islam, and a Muslim must establish prayer whether he is healthy or sick, as a person is not legally excused to give up prayer, but rather it is obligatory upon him to perform prayer in whatever condition. So, a Muslim must establish prayer as Allah exalted be He has ordained. We evoke Allah to guide us to what satisfies Him.
So these ahkam regarding al-azar is regarding somewhat to clarify to the Muslim that the Muslim, even in times of difficulties, that one still is expected to make their salah. So the person might be experiencing illness, and these things does occur, but by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the Sharia have taken these things into consideration and have set rules and guidelines regarding these matters. So the person should not feel that these things have been, Islam have been, there's an absence and discussion on these matters, but rather that there's clarity regarding these matters. So of the things that mentioned regarding the first of those people who may have a situation is regarding, and it is a legitimate thing for them to do is to pray sitting, standing, even holding on to something on their side, on their back, as suited to their situation and circumstance, that they still should observe some salat, but pray in the way which is that they are able. With this, inshallah ta'ala, we'll finish for today. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذه السبيل والآخر دعوانا الحمد لله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.